Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Who else would it be? We're always presented by Full Press Coverage. They're our good friends. You can find our podcast and many other great podcasts on fullpresscoverage.com. So today, and I have a feeling that this is on purpose, we're going to do another Quest for Banner 18 and just check in on the Celtics and the Lakers. The reason I think this is on purpose is because my co-host and dear friend, Mr. John Sapichetti, knows the pain I'm in as a Celtics fan, and then sees that Anthony Davis is coming back soon on the horizon for the Lakers and wants to torture me today. So I'll let you start, Sap. Is that why?
No, actually, I wish that more members of the Boston Celtics had your passion and felt your pain of how this team is playing right now, which is a 20-20 team, the same record as the Charlotte Hornets, the same win percentage as the New York Knicks, right? So you wouldn't think that in the middle of March that would be talking about the Celtics, Knicks, and Hornets with essentially the same record. And you seem to be totally upset by their performance, and that's why I embrace you. You're a real Celtics guy. I mean, I don't see this from Jason Tatum. I don't see this from players. I don't certainly see it from Brad Stevens or Danny Ainge. They're just kind of on autopilot. And if you're a Celtic fan, I think it's infuriating because I think of the four major sports in the city, Celtic fans tend to be the most intellectual. Like they kind of just look at it and they analyze it. They're not as emotional as, say, Bruins fans. They're not as arrogant and ready to fight the entire world like Patriot fans, right? Red Sox fans now are kind of going through some sort of metamorphosis. But I think the Celtic fans are really the most intellectualized, and they'll look and say, well, better draft, do this, make a move. Jason Tatum's going to get better. Jaylen Brown's going to get better. I don't sense a lot of emotion. Too calm. Yeah, it's almost like, okay, the plane is about to crash. It's nice to have the pilot in charge that's, in total control. But as it's about to crash, you might start freaking out. And I've always considered Brad Stevens to be like a pilot, right? Which I like that temperament.
Way too
but I
calm.
can see where way too calm. It's like, you got eliminated, Brad.
You're going down, Brad.
Going down, Brad.
Both the engines are gone, Brad.
And I got to give you credit. You were the first person when we were on the Herald together 2-3 years ago that you weren't really sold on Brad Stevens. The rest of us were like, this is the greatest coach in the NBA. This is a guy who could coach in the NFL if he so chose. And you said, well, I don't know if he can really coach high-level talent. And in that 2018-19 season, we saw that, right? That team imploded with all of that talent. And here we are now this year, a year after making the Eastern Conference Finals, and they're a 500 team. And I don't know how they're going to fix it. They beat bad teams, right? They're really good at that for the most part, except they couldn't even beat Cleveland the other night with my man Colin Sexton, who, by the way, shows way more passion than anybody is on the Celtics. And you could have had Colin Sexton if you hadn't traded for Kyrie Irving. But they made the right move in trying to get Kyrie Irving because you didn't know Kyrie was a complete lunatic. But they're also 0-8 against the top 5 teams in basketball. They did beat the Clippers twice.
Stat.
Right, they beat the Clippers twice, but technically the Clippers aren't one of the 5 best teams in basketball record-wise. It's Philly and Brooklyn in the East, the Lakers,
so Phoenix,
and Utah Jazz. Right, and those are those 5 teams. So I give you credit. You have more passion in your pinky finger than most of the Celtics players and executives have in their entire bodies. You're upset by this, and that's what makes you, a fan, but also a pundit here. And that's why we kind of, drive through this. We can't just say, well, it's been a nice run for the Celtics the last 5 years with Brad Stevens. It's like, what the hell is this team doing? It doesn't look like it's getting any better.
No, I think you have to be realistic. And I think a lot of Celtics fans aren't realistic. It's that they're wearing that green colored glasses, right? That they're always it's the opposite. And I know we're going to stay focused here on basketball, but just for a quick tangent, it's the opposite of Red Sox fans in this city who, when the Red Sox a couple years ago, when they had their best regular season ever and went on to whip through the postseason, people were still hemming and hawing over, the relief pitching and the on base percent. Like, it's like, well, this team is just cranking through every other team en route to another World Series, and people were, they don't have enough right-handed pitching on this team. It's the complete opposite of what the Celtics fans are like.
Yeah, I mean, that Red Sox team, I think, is the best baseball team of this century, right? They went 108-54 in the regular season, 11-3 in the postseason. They were kind of the '07 Patriots, except they sealed the deal and actually
They
won
tore
the
through the
championship.
league.
They did, and they beat really top-level teams in the postseason. The Yankees, Houston was the defending champ, and then they went in and crushed the Dodgers, who, at a tremendous team, makes the playoffs every year. And yeah, throughout that entire season, I don't really trust this team. Mookie Betts isn't good in the postseason. What's
crazy.
Up with their pitching staff? Yeah, just all these crazy things. So Red Sox fans are neurotic by nature. And I don't know if it's generation to generation, because my dad was born in 1924. He died in 1999. He never saw the Red Sox win a World Series, so it was kind of like same old Red Sox.
Right.
Now, the last nearly 20 years, they've won 4 World Series. The Celtics have won 1. So who's been a better franchise under these current ownerships, right? Wick Grossbeck, who we love. I think he's a phenomenal owner. I like the fact that he's pretty transparent. He goes on shows and talks. He's phenomenal in the community. They won 1 championship. John Henry, who's kind of, a little bit like the guy from Weekend at Bernie's. No one even knows.
I believe
what
Barstool
he does.
calls him Dr. Creepy, is what their nickname.
Yeah, it's just a strange guy. Everybody hates him. And now the ownership is hated even more now that LeBron James owns 2% of Fenway Sports Group. So, and all the people are always negative about the Red Sox. They've won 4 World Series in the last 18, 19 years.
It's unexplainable, right? The
it really is, yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
The Celtics have had 1 general manager for 18 years. The Red Sox during that time, you went from, Theo Epstein, you had Dave Dombrowski, now you've got Chaim Bloom.
And you also had, what's his name, who was short-lived.
It was here for a short period of time. Yeah, and he won a World Series in 2000. Jed Hoyer was here, but there was one other. I mean, this is how many they've had that won.
A lot of managers, too.
Bobby V. Bobby V, Terry Francona, John Farrell. Now you got Alex Cora. And then, these guys won World Series except for Bobby Valentine. So they make changes. They overreact, and the Celtics just seem to be numb, paralysis through analysis. So I just thought it'd be a good idea. And I'm not rubbing this in, because I admire the fact that you're passionate about your Celtics. I don't think Brad Stevens getting fired anytime soon, but who would be a good candidate or candidates to be the next head coach of the Boston Celtics? And I should kind of paint it more as, who should be, not who could be, because now we're making the decision. You're now the general manager of the Celtics, Jeff, which I think you do a better job than Danny Ainge, because you're more passionate and more proactive. And obviously, if Brad gets fired by before the end of the season, they're going to put in one of the assistant coaches to coach the team till the end of the season.
Right,
but
we're not counting that.
Don't count that. But going forward, I've got a bunch of candidates, but I want to hear yours as well.
Yeah, so I do think that this is his last season with the Celtics. I've been on record saying that. I think that he's too close to Danny Ainge for them to axe him in the middle of the season. Right. I think that there's some mutual respect there, but I think that they'll have Brad Stevens and the Celtics mutually agreed to part ways after the season. It wasn't working out when, really he was fired. Because I think they're going to lose in the first round. And I think finally the fans will be able to create some sort of movement within the ownership group to say, hey, Danny, you got to make a change here. But
what happens? What happens?
I wouldn't put my house on it.
What happens if they end up as the 9 seed and losing that crazy play-in thing? I mean, that's
thing.
Even worse. But
I'll tell you this: Ainge isn't losing his job. That's not happening. No, he's too close. He's basically he's like Wick Grossbeck's father. I don't know what the age difference is between. They might be the same age, but I feel like that's how Wick Grossbeck looks at him.
Yeah. And the thing is, too, Danny Ainge, you feel like he's either the Pope or a Supreme Court justice. It's like job for life. So he's not going anywhere.
It's insanity. It's insanity.
It really is.
But
you do change the coach, right? If things don't get better at some point. And we have to monitor what happens with the Indiana Hoosiers. If they don't name a coach soon, because we've already seen BC name a coach. Richard Pitino got fired at Minnesota, and now he's coaching in New Mexico. They make these changes quickly in college basketball because of recruiting. You want to get the ball rolling on the next year. If Indiana doesn't name a coach for a period of time here, then you kind of read the tea leaves and say that Brad Stevens may be heading in that direction. That's probably his dream job.
Yeah, if I was Indiana, I'd sit. I'd just sit and wait and
Yep.
see what happens because, again, if that's everything I've read about them, that's obviously their number one candidate. We know he's
Yep.
a great college coach. We know he's a great coach of young talent. He gets the most out of that. He can't coach stars. And I think at this point, the act sort of worn thin. The players pretty obviously aren't listening to him anymore. You can just look at the defensive numbers of the Celtics and look at who they lost in the offseason. They lost Gordon Hayward, not necessarily a defensive world beater, and the defense is so much worse. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not because Gordon Hayward left, it's because the team is tuning him out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's going to be gone. And again, if I'm Indiana, if he's truly their number one candidate, and I think he would be a fantastic college coach again, especially with the resources of an Indiana, I would just wait. What's the worst thing that happens? You're last in the coaching cycle, and maybe you hire a guy for a year. He does as a tryout, maybe a young alum, and if he does well, great. If he doesn't, then you figure
Or
it out.
you
The
just
next year.
wait. Just wait because it's worth the wait, right? So maybe you punt on next season if you're Indiana. They haven't been a factor for several years in the
No,
Big Ten. So
I don't think
just
it's a big
punt and
deal.
wait as long as if it's May and you hire Brad Stevens or June. Sure, you're a couple months behind everybody else, but Brad Stevens has enough cachet that he'll get you into at least close to being a contender next year for the Hoosiers. And then going forward, I think he builds a tremendous program.
Right. So
We've
I think
already got the guy fired, so
I think you're right in that's a dream job of his. I think that and Duke are the two jobs he's always
Sure.
had his eye on. And if he was going to go back to college, obviously, I don't think he wants to be fired. I think he'd prefer to remain the head coach of the Celtics. But at this point, it's not working for anybody. I mean, he looks upset. The team looks upset. So unless the Celtics are willing to completely overhaul the roster and do an NFL thing and keep the coach and get rid of the players, which you should never do in the NBA, it makes no sense at all. I think he's definitely gone. So you're asking me who I want to be the next head coach of the Celtics besides
more
myself.
so than who you're going to predict. Well, no, you're the general manager unless you want to be GM.
Well, I can
and
do
coach.
both. I can do
Yeah,
both.
you can. Absolutely. Trainer, broadcaster, everything.
I've been pretty clear about this, and I've said this to you too before, Sap. I want somebody who has played in the NBA to be the Celtics' next head coach. I think that's really, really important. I can't understate how important I think that has been to this demise of the Celtics and them tuning out the coaching staff. Is that you don't have any ex-NBA players on the staff or anybody who didn't have just a cup of coffee in the NBA. Once you lost Walter McCarty, he was your most experienced NBA player as a coach, and he's since had some issues since he left the Celtics coaching staff. But I would like somebody who not just was in the NBA as the last guy on the bench, but somebody who really went through, multiple seasons as a veteran, maybe played on a championship team. That's the kind of guy I'm targeting. So if I'm looking at those names, I'm looking at guys like Sam Cassell, who is a player for the Celtics, not for long, but has been studying under Doc Rivers for a long time. Again, he would be a first-year head coach, but I think the players would immediately respect him because, he was a couple-time All-Star. He's won a title. He's won a few titles. I think he's got 3 rings, one with the Celtics, 2 with the Rockets, and has been, around NBA locker rooms for 30 years now. Juan Howard's a name that's generating a lot of interest. He did a great job at Michigan this year. I would assume Michigan's going to do everything they can to try to keep him and probably give him a nice pay bump. That's obviously his alma mater, but I know a lot of NBA teams are interested in him. Obviously had a long and very successful NBA career. Mark Jackson's a name that's bandied about a lot. He did a pretty good job with Golden State, but some serious issues with the assistant coaching staff there, an issue with Brian Scalabrine, who works for the Celtics now. And he's got some weird religious stuff going on. So I'm not sure the Celtics want to go in that direction, but that's the kind of mold I'm thinking of. Another couple of names just to throw out there. Earl Watson, I know, failed miserably in Phoenix, but has a relationship with Jason Tatum that he's talked about before, that he really wanted to go to Phoenix because of Earl Watson. Make heads or tails of that. But you want to keep Jason Tatum happy if you can. And Earl Watson maybe, was a product more of Phoenix having a terrible roster than him being a bad coach. Ime Udoka, a guy from the Spurs system, less of a star player but more of a role player, but played on a couple championship Spurs teams. And then I have a couple names for guys who didn't play in the NBA, but I think are good coaches, but I'd rather go the NBA player route. Kenny Atkinson, who is a good coach for the Nets, and Dave Yeager, who was a good coach for the Grizzlies and the Kings. But I'd like them to hire a guy who is an ex-player. I think that's the best move for them. So those are just some names I have, Sap. Do you have any names of that I didn't mention?
I have, plenty of them, actually. I'm on board with Mark Jackson because I think Mark Jackson is a great motivator, smart player when he played for the Knicks, and he did a good job at Golden State.
But there's some question marks there, right?
Without question. And you know what? He may not want to coach anymore. He's doing great work with ABC and ESPN and makes a ton of money. What's better than, broadcasting games when you can come into a city, especially once, COVID is somewhat under control, and you sit there with Jeff Van Gundy, Mike Breen. I think that's a tremendous
so much less of a
broadcasting
headache.
team. Yeah, and you just kind of have fun with your friends doing the game. And I love Jackson on the air because he'll criticize players. He'll criticize LeBron James. He criticized LeBron James in the finals a couple of years back, saying, LeBron, you're better than this. You got to get back on defense. Like, you don't generally see that from a broadcaster. That's why the NBA is so great, because broadcasters aren't afraid, especially national guys, to go at it and criticize players.
Only
the local broadcasters,
guys.
The national guys. Yeah, well, the local guys, look, Kendrick Perkins is a local guy who's ready to criticize everybody. Scalabrine, to talk about, green-colored glasses. He's at the deepest shade of green, the glasses that he wears. In fact, mentioning Kendrick Perkins, that's one name I threw out there. I was kind of hoping that Brad Stevens reached out to Kendrick Perkins to be an assistant coach this year, because I think that Kendrick Perkins would instill the fear of God in these players, right? Just, he's 6'10", he's got that beard. He's a big, lovable guy, but, when you first see him with that deep Texas drawl,
right,
you're like, I'm not going to upset this guy because he might wring my neck. If Tatum or Marcus Smart or Brown or whoever's, giving any lip, there's an old term, giving any lip to the coach, I think Kendrick Perkins could be the guy that says, this is the way we're doing this, almost like a drill instructor. But I think he's having a great time working for ESPN and for NBC Sports Boston.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to coach right now. He's doing from home. He's everywhere too right now. He's
awesome.
Everywhere.
Yeah, he's awesome, and we'll get him on the podcast soon enough. He's sensational. I love Kendrick Perkins. Mark Jackson was a name up there. Kevin Ollie is someone who had a long career.
That's somebody I forgot. That's a good one
in the NBA. In fact, I am shocked that wherever Kevin Durant's been, Kevin Ollie hasn't been the coach, because Kevin Ollie was with Oklahoma City with Durant, Westbrook, and Harden. They loved him. He was the veteran on the team, and the young players really kind of learned how to be pros under Kevin Ollie, who was a journeyman, but a real long career in the NBA, won a national championship at Connecticut, but he's kind of fallen by the wayside. I think there's some weird things that went on with Kevin Ollie, so I'm not really sure
a weird,
about.
Unceremonious end at Connecticut for a guy who you thought would have had the job. It seemed like he was going to have the job for life after, Jim Calhoun retired, and then Ollie won a national championship in either his first or his second year coaching there. He was an alum there. It seemed like it was going to be, Connecticut was going to be a perennial powerhouse again. And then it just kind of fell apart. It was weird.
Two other names I'll throw out there that are on the current staff, which can always be difficult, right?
Bad idea.
If you're going to go in a different direction, you want to go in a different direction, because if the coaching staff in general is not doing a great job, why would you keep someone on board who's part of that coaching staff? Jerome Allen and Evan Turner. But again, nothing spectacular there, so we can move on from them. My absolute number one pick is someone who's coaching in the NBA, doing a phenomenal job in the NBA, maybe coach of the year in the NBA, and that's Monty Williams with the Phoenix Suns. Now, he's under contract with the Suns.
Right, you're not getting him.
You're not getting him. And if the Suns, who are not generally considered a well-run organization, are smart, they're already talking extension with him, right? Because this guy is someone that I wanted the Lakers to hire him before the start of last season, not Frank Vogel. I thought Monty Williams would have been a great choice. So that's my absolute wish list. Kevin Ollie's probably the one that could happen because he's available. But are there any red flags there? As far as Kendrick Perkins and Mark Jackson, they may not even want to do it because they're making plenty of money and having a blast doing what they're doing now. And I don't think it makes sense to hire from within. Right? You got to get someone with more cachet than Jerome Allen and Evan Turner. At this
point,
do you think
Evan
of Sam
Turner
Cassell? Maybe does. I like that choice. I think Sam Cassell would be excellent. He was a guy that I'm sure when he was on the Celtics, you loved him. You probably loved him in Houston. I mean, you were really young when he was winning back-to-back titles with the Rockets, but he's your kind of guy, like a clutch, in-your-face defender, which makes a good coach. Generally the great players don't make great coaches. I mean, Magic Johnson tried it for like a couple of months, and he was like, I can't do this. This isn't right. Bird was pretty good as a head coach, kind of more of a CEO. But generally, the great players don't make great coaches. Like Jerry West was a pretty successful coach. I think the greatest executive in the history of the sport. But my absolute favorite one would be Monty Williams, followed by Kevin Ollie. Those are the two guys. And again, that's a wish list.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite one would be Greg Popovich too, but it's not happening.
Well, I love Pop. Pop to me is the greatest coach in the history of the sport because he won with he had Tim Duncan, yes, and he had Manu Ginobili and all of those guys, Tony Parker and Kawhi later on. But he also could win with different types of teams, team that scored a lot, a team that defended, a team that scored. He develops players. But yeah, Monty Williams would be the guy. And maybe Phoenix will screw up and not sign to an extension. And, can you be really aggressive maybe if you're the Celtics and say to Phoenix, we want this guy, we'll send back whatever. I mean, Danny's got still 1 million draft picks, but I don't think Phoenix would part ways with Monty Williams. He's doing too good a job right now. But Kevin Ollie would be the guy because he's available.
Yeah, if there's, like you said, if there's no real red flags there too. Although he doesn't have the NBA coaching experience, but he was a long-time player, obviously. Yeah, I would have no problem with that. Again, I have like an irrational like of Dave Yeager, so I wouldn't. I'd like that hire too, but he seemed to have some sort of weird personality stuff where he goes out like a year after he starts a job. But I do have that strong preference of get these guys with a guy who's been in the NBA for a long time, who they'll respect and listen to. I think that, the problem you were mentioning with Brad Stevens hiring, like a Kendrick Perkins, it seems like he just wants to hire a bunch of guys who agree with him, honestly, at this point, and just say, this is the philosophy. We're going to listen to Brad Stevens. No one who's really, that outspoken, and sort of go with the Brad Stevens methodology of not, having big reactions one way or another. It's not like the most animated coaching staff in the world.
No, not at all. They're pilots. They got a lot of pilots on that coaching staff. So, and again, does a head coach ever want a big personality at coach as an assistant coach? We know Belichick would never put up with that. He barely lets his assistant coaches speak to the media. Perk is a star, right? Perk is a legitimate star.
Personality-wise.
Personality-wise, the guy is just Marcus Spears on football and Kendrick Perkins on basketball, ESPN, they've got to team those guys up together. That would be a phenomenal podcast because they're both very similar. They're passionate and they really have no filter, which I love.
Here's the thing with personalities of coaches. I have no problem if a coach is of the Brad Stevens mold with the, very calm, cool, and collected, but you have to sometimes change it up if it's not working, right? You need to have the ability to start yelling and screaming and motivate your guys that way. You can't just be one way 100% of the time. That's just not going to work. And I think that being unflappable is really good. That's a strong thing. And we see, Belichick is pretty, he doesn't have a lot of emotions on the sideline, but you've seen him get animated at times.
Sure.
And I know football is different than basketball. I don't want the basketball coach. I don't want Bobby Knight who's throwing chairs and screaming on every play. I don't think that's helpful either. But you need
a Tom Izzo grabbing his players.
Yeah. But listen, if you go and talk to the Michigan State guys, they'll defend Tom Izzo like he was their father, their brother.
Draymond Green might as well be his spokesman. Draymond Green loves Tom Izzo.
So I think you need a coach that at least has the ability to do both things. And I don't think Brad Stevens ever shown the ability. And in the face of adversity this season has just maintained the same sort of demeanor. Doesn't seem to be any fire or passion, as you mentioned, to try to turn things around. And if you're not getting it from your coach, the players aren't going to respond. And you've seen that this season. So I do think the Celtics are going to have a new head coach next year. Whether Indiana is patient enough to wait for Brad Stevens to become available, that's a different story. So I wouldn't be shocked if Brad Stevens is coaching another NBA team next year because Indiana gets impatient and hires somebody else quickly. But I do think regardless, the Celtics are going to have a new head coach. So we'll see who it is. I would like for it to be a new head coach and a new general manager, but I just don't see any way that the ownership group parts with Danny Ainge. He's the sacred cow of all sacred cows.
Yeah, no, I think Danny Ainge is going to be here for as long as he wants to be.
Which makes no sense to me, but I don't have $1 billion to buy the team. They're worth more than $1 billion now. They're probably worth like
Oh
$3
yeah, at
billion.
this point. Yeah, I mean the Clippers sold for $2 billion 7 years ago.
Yeah, so I'd say like probably got to be close to $3 billion to buy the
Yeah,
Celtics
they
right
are,
now.
without
All right, I
question.
got to start a fundraiser. Um, Well, the other team that we check in on in Quest for Banner 18, Sap, is your Los Angeles Lakers. I say that temporarily because wherever LeBron goes, that's your team. But currently,
Yes.
he is a member of the Lakers, so they're your Los Angeles Lakers. I know you just told me you bought a new Lakers shirt, so you're very excited. You know, you're not nearly as down as I am about the Celtics. I think you're pretty optimistic about the Lakers.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely optimistic. Again, when Anthony Davis comes back, they'll be whole. As we get to the trade deadline, if they can add a big man, or in the buyout market, if they can add a big man, I think they'll be in great shape to return to the finals. I mean, I said at the beginning of the season, and I felt even more confident in it now that it's going to be the Lakers and Nets. And I know that turns you off, but that's what it looks like it's going to be in the finals, unless Durant's injury concern is more than they're letting on.
I don't disagree with you. I think it's going to be that too. I've said this before. It's my nightmare, but it's what's the most likely thing that's going to happen, and it's going to emotionally crush me, Sap. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be a shell of myself. We're not going to do podcasts that week. 2
Won't
weeks
be able to find
the NBA not during the NBA finals. That's the best time to take off for a basketball podcast.
Pretty much so, yeah. Well, I worked with a co-host once at the Herald in the morning doing a political show. And that person was a huge Trump supporter. Trump won the election on Tuesday night. And the next morning, I was there, ready to do the show at 6 a.m. In fact, I got off the air at 2 a.m., had a 4-hour break. I slept in the
let's make it clear
room.
You're talking about the not this past election, because some people might think
2016.
you're saying Trump won this past election.
Well, yeah, I'm not going there. This was 2016. So I think it was November 8th. Of 2016. Sometimes the dates all kind of blend together.
Right.
But I was on the air till 2 a.m. and then I had to start my show at 6 a.m. So I'm like, I'm not going home for, an hour and a half. I was in a suit and tie anyway. Always dress up for election day. That's my thing. So, but that person called me and says, I don't really feel like coming in today. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. You're a Trump supporter. You should come in and spike the football today, right? Your guy won.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I didn't really care. I mean, I voted for Hillary Clinton, but I didn't care. No, in fact, I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. I wrote in John Huntsman, who was a two-term governor in Utah. And
really
I think a very moderate guy. Yeah, well, Massachusetts, I could have voted for myself, and it would not have tipped the scales. But this would be like me, we're doing talk radio where we do a podcast and the Lakers win a title. And I'm like, Jed, you know what? I don't want to do a podcast the next day. It's like, that's the time I want to do a podcast. Or if we're doing sports radio and the Packers win the Super Bowl and Rodgers is the MVP, I'm showing up early for that show, Jet. But
when we were at the Herald together after the Patriots won the Super Bowl and the Red Sox won the World Series, those were my favorite shows to do. It was like victory lap shows.
The only shows that for pure radio, though, I think it's better when they lose.
It is.
Like,
you're 100% right. It's better.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, when they lost to the
teams lose, it's not when teams suck. It's when they're good and lose.
That's bad.
That's when the best shows are.
The Super Bowl lost to the Eagles, because we talked about that for like 3 months, right? What happened with Malcolm Butler? Brady threw for 505. There were so many storylines. Yeah, that's when it's really, really interesting, because we root for the story more than anything. I mean, you love the Celtics. I love the Lakers.
If I was doing radio back when the the Red Sox lost to the Yankees in the ALCS, on the strength of the Aaron Boone home run, I'm sure that would have been, it would have been miserable, but the amount of calls that would have generated. I was a little too young to be on the air at that point in time. I was just bitching to my friends.
Yeah, you were like 14.
Yeah, I was in high school. I was like a freshman or a sophomore in high school.
Now, if LeBron had owned the team, then they would have beat the Yankees. But LeBron wasn't much.
Well, it all worked out in the end for the Red Sox.
Yes, right.
They got their revenge.
They did okay. Yep.
Even though the fans don't think so.
No. But haven't had a good run here.
We're talking about the Lakers, though. We're not talking about the Red Sox or the Patriots or any other team. And I do want to get into mostly what Kyle Kuzma said about LeBron and his MVPs. But before that, I really quickly want to just push back on something and ask you this question. Can Lakers fans and Lakers players relax with the Taylor Horton Tucker thing? I heard, was it maybe it was Kyle Kuzma saying this too. Like he would be Anthony Edwards if he was on another team. He'd be this amazing. Like he's fine.
He's a nice piece.
But they're talking about him like he's going to be the future MVP of the league. It's getting out of control.
I'll make a deal with you. And
this is a Laker thing.
This is a Laker thing, just like Peyton Pritchard is a Celtic thing.
Yeah,
right?
No, that's fair. I mean, Peyton
that's pretty much what it is. And
all
those two fan bases, tend to blow up their players to the point. The only organization that doesn't overrate their players are the Red Sox. Like they had the best player in baseball nearly for 6 years, Mookie Betts, and everybody was bitching. Well, he's really not good in the postseason, and Bogarts isn't all that good. Meanwhile, the Celtics, Peyton Pritchard is off to a faster start than Steph Curry. I'm like, what? THT is a nice piece for the Lakers. He's like an energy guy. He's like a 8th or 9th guy, and that's fine. And LeBron likes him. I think he's a clutch client, so that probably helps matters in the locker room. So I'll give you that. Laker fans. I mean, again, when you're on Twitter, you're dealing with like the most crazy 5% of the people on planet Earth. I mean,
Kyle Kuzma said he would be Anthony Edwards if he was on a worse team.
No, he's not that. Anthony Edwards' athletic ability is through the roof.
He's 19. He just had a 40-point game.
Yeah, I mean, the player I compared to Anthony Edwards, we love doing comps, and being as old as I am, I can go back to guys that are in the Hall of Fame and have been in there for a long time, is Mitch Richmond, who was a dynamic two-guard, with Golden State for a long period of time, a multiple-time All-Star. That's who reminds me of, like a 6'4", 6'5" guard.
Too.
In the Hall of Fame, kind of really strong. Like Anthony Edwards is strong.
I wouldn't. He looks like a guy. Hall of Fame, but he's in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, Mitch Richmond. Yeah, I mean, everybody's in there. That's why I'm hoping for my man Marcus Johnson to get in there because he was every bit, if not a better player than Mitch Richmond. But the Laker fans, like Celtic fans, tend to overrate their players. That's all right. What happens.
And here's another irrational thing that Kyle Kuzma said, and I know you are going to disagree with me saying this. He says LeBron should have 8 or 9 MVPs. LeBron, to the surprise of nobody, agreed with that sentiment.
Yep.
So, Sap, let me ask you this.
No. He didn't agree. He said he should have more than 4.
He agreed with Kyle Kuzma.
More than 4 doesn't mean 8 or 9.
Okay. How many?
There's those numbers, 5, 6, and 7, too.
Here's the question. How many MVPs should LeBron have? And which ones are you taking away from other players? Because you can't have it both ways where he's splitting MVPs. I need you to definitively say he deserved it more than X player. So what years should he? Because I know you think he should have more than 4. I know you. You probably think he should have a dozen.
What year is he in? 18th. So he should be, getting ready for his 18th MVP. He has 4. Kareem has 6. Russell and Jordan have 5 each. Wilt has 4. LeBron has 4. And then you got Moses Malone, who we talked about in the last podcast. I think the most underrated great player in the history of the NBA has 3. Bird has 3. And Magic have 3. So that kind of lets you know how great those players are and were. LeBron has 4. I think he deserved all of those. I would say in 2006, you can make a real case that he deserved it over Steve Nash. Nash averaged 19 and 10.5 assists per game that year. LeBron led the league in scoring at 31.4 points per game, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. He had Cleveland win 50 games, which, Cleveland does about once a decade until LeBron shows up. So I think he could have won that MVP. 2014, I have no, and I'm going to go through his second.
I don't want to hear could have. Should I want only want should have.
Okay, 2006, without question.
Sorry, Steve Nash.
Sorry, Steve Nash. 2011, I think he had a better year than Derrick Rose.
I knew you were going to say this one. I have it written down.
That's the one. And here's the thing: you do realize that every player that's won an MVP in NBA history is in the Hall of Fame unless they're not eligible to be in the Hall of Fame, right? Like, Nowitzki isn't in yet, but he's going in. Derrick Rose is probably the one guy that's won an MVP that may not make the Hall of Fame. Now, again, he had a great year that year. I wouldn't put him in. I mean, the injuries have really sapped his Hall of Fame potential. So I think LeBron should have won it that year. There was a lot of blowback against LeBron that year because that was the year of the decision. He had won the previous 2 MVPs, and then he won the next 2 MVPs. He would have won 5 in a row. And I think it was clear that he was the best player in the sport at that point for that 5 year
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean MVP.
Doesn't mean because I still think he's the best player in the league, and he hasn't won one since 2013. So
that year, Sap, the Bulls did have a better record than the Heat by 4 games. in fairness to LeBron, he averaged more points and rebounds, and they had very close assist numbers than Rose.
Right.
But no one was expecting the Bulls to be that good, and especially with LeBron's, compadres of Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade, I think people looked at Derrick Rose, and he was playing with, who the hell was on that team? Luol Deng,
Joakim Noah,
Boozer, Joakim Noah. I think they looked at it and said, well, they won 4 more games than this Miami Heat team, and he's got not nearly the amount of firepower that Heat did. So I could certainly see, when you average more points and rebounds and basically the same assists, that's kind of hard to take.
And you're a better defensive player too.
But Rose did have a remarkable year that year, and more so the Bulls had an amazing year that year.
Derrick Rose that year was a great story, right? Young guy who was very likable, who was playing for his hometown team. I think
the Bulls won 61 games that year.
They did. Crazy. And it was like the Bulls had been irrelevant since 1998, and here we are a decade later, and they've got their next superstar, and it never really panned out for Derrick Rose because of the injuries. I also think this is an odd one. In 2018, James Harden won the MVP, and he averaged, 30 points, 5.4 rebounds, 8.8 assists per game. He played 72 games, so he missed 10 games. LeBron that year, that was the year he dragged Cleveland to the finals, where Jeff Green was the second best player. Kevin Love was always hurt. Kyrie was already playing in Boston. LeBron that year averaged 28, nearly 9 rebounds, 9 assists. He played all 82 games, better defensive player than James Harden. My issue with that is in the voting, Harden got 86 first place votes. LeBron got 15. It should have been closer than that, and I think he should have won it. And even last year, Giannis had a phenomenal year, right? 29, 13, 5.5 assists. LeBron had 25, 8, led the league in assists, 10.2 assists. Again, the discrepancy in first place votes is alarming. Giannis got 85, LeBron got 16. There's MVP fatigue with LeBron James. And that sometimes does happen in basketball. It happened with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan should have more than 5. He should have 8. I think LeBron could make a case that he should have 6 or 7. I won't go 8 or 9 like Kyle Kuzma, but I think in 06 and in 011, those were the 2 he should have won.
I could see that. I was looking at it and saying the years that I would have given it to him and said, obviously, I think these past 2 years, Giannis has been very well deserving of both of them. He won freaking Defensive Player of the Year last year, too, and MVP. I think, and our old ex-producer, Christian Burgoyne, would kill me. I think you could look at either of those Curry MVP years.
True.
He said LeBron had a decent case in those years, too. In 13-14, Miami had a better record than the Warriors. LeBron averaged more points and rebounds and had a much higher player efficiency rating than Curry.
I don't think Curry didn't win the MVP that year. That was Durant. 13-14 was Durant.
So then maybe I'm thinking 14-15.
14-15, yeah. 14-15.
Whatever the first of Curry's MVP years.
Was 14-15. The unanimous one Curry deserved. He led the league in scoring. The team won 73 games.
Yeah, it's the first one I was looking at. So the first MVP, Curry averaged 24 points a game, 23.8. LeBron averaged more points and rebounds, and again, the assists aren't that far off. The issue, and LeBron had a higher player efficiency rating. The issue is the shooting percentages for Curry are always just through the roof, and LeBron's shooting percentages are okay, but when you compare anybody's to Curry's, they're crazy. So the first MVP year of Curry, I just had the year wrong on it, but the numbers are the same that I was looking at. But
right. Yeah,
I think you could make a case for that one. The second one, you're right. He did lead the league in score. His numbers is the unanimous MVP. Curry averaged 30 points a game, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, 2.5 steals. The shooting numbers are incredible. And how many games did they win that year? They won
73-9.
Yeah,
no, that was rubber stamp. Unanimous. LeBron came close to winning unanimous MVP in 2013. Only one voter voted for Carmelo Anthony second, and that was Gary Washburn of the Globe.
Yeah, it's Gary Washburn. I was going to say that was bizarre.
We had him on 15-10, and we asked him about it, and he got kind of pissed off. I'm like, well, you voted for him. It's not like, we're making this stuff up.
Yeah, Curry's 23.8 points per game that first MVP year was the lowest amount of of points per game since Steve Nash won his second one in 05-06. And also it's been the lowest since, and it's not been close. 23 was the lowest, and then it's been he had 30 the next year. 31 was Westbrook. 30 was Harden. Giannis has averaged 27 and 29 the past 2 years. So that's 23 is low for points per game for an MVP in the NBA.
Because that's the best thing Steph Curry does, right? Like LeBron can average 27 a game, and still that's maybe not his best skill because he's the best passer in the sport, right? And he's an elite defender when he feels like it, and he does this year. So that's a good point. I didn't even think of that one. So I think you could make a case he should have 6, maybe 7. So Kuzma wasn't that far off.
I'd probably give him 6. I think 8 and 9 is getting a little bit ridiculous. But I could see 6.
It's like the Oscars, right? At some point, it's like, well,
they give it to Meryl Streep every year.
No, they don't. See that? Knew you were going to bring that up because you don't think she's the greatest actress ever. I do. Meryl Streep's only won 3 Oscars, 2 for Best Actress, 1 for Best Supporting Actress. She's only won 1 since 1982. Like, she's the greatest actress ever, and she has 3 Oscars. Again, 2 for Best Actress, 1 for Best Supporting Actress. Daniel Day-Lewis is the only actor with 3 Oscars for Best Actor in a lead role. So
I'm just looking at this app of the past, say since the millennium, since 2000. Who's the weakest MVP? Do you think those Steve Nash MVPs?
They could have been, because I thought Shaq should have won one of them. Kobe could have won one of them. But again, it's almost like I think at some point.
I thought was it the second one? What was the year Kobe had the 81? Because that's the year he should have won MVP.
06. That was 06.
He had an insane scoring year that year.
He should have won 37 a game. But did they make the playoffs that year? Did they not make the playoffs, or they just barely qualified? So that kind of factors into it, right?
The team sucked that year, but he was incredible.
He was great. I mean, Kobe deserves more than 1, right? Shaq only has 1. Come on. I mean, when you look at all the great centers, Kareem with 6 and Russell with 5 and Wilt with 4, Moses with 3, you would think that maybe Shaq should have an additional MVP. I thought Iverson deserved his MVP. I mean, talk about dragging a suck-ass team to the finals. The 01 76ers. I would say probably Steve Nash.
Lakers did make the playoffs that year, by the way. They were the 7th seed.
They were the 7th seed. So he dragged. I remember the Lakers were bereft of talent because then they added Cassell 2 years later, and they started to put together a team.
That was 05-06. You had 3 30-plus point per game scorers, and almost 4 because Gilbert Arenas averaged 29. LeBron James averaged 31.4. He was at that point, 16. 33 points per game for Allen Iverson, and then 35.4 for Kobe Bryant. Which he also played 80 games that year.
And LeBron and Kobe played both ends of the court, right? I mean, Iverson was not a real good defensive player. Led the league in steals several times, but steals don't necessarily mean you're a great defensive player. So I would say Nash was probably the guy.
The team was great, but he averaged, his numbers weren't incredible. The assists 10.5, 4 rebounds. He shot 92% from the free throw line, and he averaged how many points per game? 18.
Yeah, so Nash was never an elite scorer. He could score, but here's the thing: the award was always for big men, and up until 1978, the players voted for it. So Kareem won it 6 times, Russell won 5. And Wilt won it 4. So, they dominated MVP voting for years. And then they started to bring in the wing guys, like Bird, Magic, Michael Jordan. Dr. J won an MVP. So that was the next level. And now you started to see smaller players win it, right? Iverson, Steve Nash, Steph Curry. So smaller players winning it. And that's why I think Dame Lillard's a true contender this year. In fact, I'd have him number 1 right now with LeBron a close second. So now the league is understanding that it's open to everybody. And now 6'1" point guards can dominate the game as much as 7'1" centers. Back when those guys were playing, it was dominated by big men.
To your point, the initial award was given in 1955-56. Bob Pettit won it. But from that period of time until 1981, when Dr. J won it, there were just 2 non-big men who won the award.
Right.
Bob Cousy in 56-57 and Oscar Robertson in 63-64.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry West never won an
Everything
MVP.
else was centers, not even power forwards. Centers. Kareem, Cowens, Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt, Russell, Moses Malone.
And as you've said, not all MVP races are the same. Check out 61-62. The 61-62 MVP race. That was the year Wilt averaged 50 and 25. He didn't win the MVP. Russell won the MVP. Wilt finished second, and I think the next three contenders were Oscar, Jerry West, and Elgin Baylor. That's a pretty good 1 through 5 in MVP voting, all deserving of the MVP. I mean, how does Wilt not win the MVP with 50 and 25?
That year, Wilt was first team All-NBA, and Bill Russell was second team All-NBA. But Bill Russell did win MVP. Go figure that one out.
Yeah, but did you see the three guys after them? Where I believe it was Oscar, Jerry West, and Elgin Baylor. Talk about that's probably the greatest 1 through 5 ever in MVP voting, because I think those 5 guys are 5 of the 12 greatest players ever.
In that race as
and
well,
Bob Pettit was a guy that was still in that discussion too in the early 60s. So they're not all the same. I think right now I would vote Lillard 1, LeBron 2nd. I think Embiid's going to fall by the wayside because of the injuries. And I think when Durant comes back, that's probably going to hurt Harden a little bit, because they may give Harden some games off. And let's not forget, James Harden tanked the first 3 weeks of the season in Houston. That should be held against him. It's the 2020-2021 MVP, not the 21 MVP. So I think that's going to hurt him.
No, and we'll continue to talk about this the rest of the season, obviously. And I think we both had, shockingly out of nowhere, Dame Lillard take the lead.
Right.
In our latest MVP standings. And that could change. It could change by this time next week. It's been a wild race. Really a fun one. It's one of the most kind of improbable years for MVP, because people have just, LeBron had it and it was a landslide, and then he slid down, and Embiid had it. No one was close. Dame Lillard has come from just behind the pack to take the lead. Who the hell knows next week who's going to be at it? I know it's not going to be somebody on the Celtics. That's all I know.
It's kind of like the 2012 Republican primary for president. Like the 8 different candidates at one point led the polls, and then Mitt Romney won.
So we'll see, and it's something we'll obviously be keeping a close eye on, and we'll see if Kyle Kuzma will be vindicated and LeBron over the next couple of years can pick up his 8th, 9th, or 10th MVPs. He's got a lot. He's got 4 more to go to get to 8, and then Kyle Kuzma will be happy at that point.
He's trying to catch Wayne Gretzky, who has 9 in the NHL.
Somebody who's not that good of a player, I hear a lot of quotes from Kyle Kuzma.
Well, he's built a brand. Well, that's the good thing about the NBA, though, right? I mean, like the 7th or 8th guy has a shoe deal. He's, a personality, right? Like the NFL, we know the quarterbacks. Like, Aaron Donald may be the best player in the NFL, right? I mean, you can make that case. Yeah. Like, we don't really
a lot of people do make that case.
We never see the guy talk. Nope. So whereas in the NBA, Kyle Kuzma is the 5th best Laker, maybe, but he's a good-looking guy. He's been connected to the Kardashians. He dresses nicely, so this is the NBA. That's what makes it such a fascinating league. There's more personality in the NBA than any other league, or actually the other 3 leagues combined.
Yeah, it's true. So we'll see what happens with the MVP race, and if Kyle Kuzma will be happy by the end of the season. I mean, LeBron's right in the thick of it. So, and
most importantly, Jet, me being happy, because I want him to win his 5th MVP. Happy. Aaron Rodgers has 3 now, which I'm happy with, and Barry Bonds has 7. He lapped the field.
Neither of those guys are catching Barry Bonds. Sorry, Kyle, but it's not. LeBron's going to be hard pressed to get to 7 at this point.
Yep.
Especially because all the young talent that's in the league and coming in the league, it's just going to be it's going to be tough. But he could get it this year. He very well could. So that's going to do it for our quest for banner 18. Nice and rosy for the Lakers. Less so for my beloved Boston Celtics. But maybe nice and rosy for if you're an Indiana Hoosier fan. Things might be turning up in the near future for you. I'm telling you, I'm advising you to wait, because he is not going to be here at the end of the season, in reference to Brad Stevens. Just be patient, IU. And Celtics fans, maybe a little less patient. Try to get some more urgency going. For Christ's sakes, enough being patient. All right, so this has been the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. You can find me on Twitter at Jet Stryer. Find Sap at JohnSap25. We'll be back tomorrow talking a little bit about some Hawks players getting the COVID vaccine and another poll from John Sapichetti. Have a good rest of your day, everybody, and make sure you tune into that podcast tomorrow. And we're on pretty much every day, so be always on the lookout for our podcast. All right, see you, everybody.